Obi-Wan Kenobi is the most disappointing thing since the Book of Boba Fett. Well, I guess originality isn't one of your best traits, man. When it was finally announced that we would get an Obi-Wan Kenobi show with Ewan McGregor, I was excited. After all, he's not only an amazing actor, but he was one of the few shining lights of the prequels. His performance as a younger Obi-Wan was amazing, and he did a good job with the material he was given. But like I already said in the Boba Fett video, Disney Star Wars has been mostly horrible, outside of The Mandalorian. So the lead up to the show really worried me, especially because of the abomination that the Book of Boba Fett was. I didn't want to see one of the most important characters in Star Wars history be ruined. But shit, I should be accustomed to it by now, since we already saw multiple legendary characters be ruined by the current regime of Star Wars, including Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Lando Calrissian, the Emperor, Cad Bane, Boba Fett. Alright, I think they get the fucking picture. It also wasn't really a worry that they would ruin his fucking character, but I was worried that the existing lore would be completely destroyed with Obi-Wan being the key protector of Luke on Tatooine. I didn't want to see him go off on a crazy adventure that could possibly create plot holes for the original trilogy, and even Star Wars Rebels, where Obi-Wan appears as an older man, protecting the true chosen one who is Luke. I don't really want to shit on anything political about the show, being that Star Wars has always been political since the original films. However, like the title of this video, I think they took the modern wokeness and political agendas way too far with this show, and especially with the way they decided to promote it. Number 1. Woke went wrong. I mean, what went wrong? The title of this video is Woke Gone Wrong, so I'm going to immediately tackle that main issue because, well, this show wasn't as bad as the Book of Boba Fett, but I still have my gripes with the show. And this is probably the biggest one I have with it. The show and the way they decided to promote it, and one of its main characters / main actresses, was leaning way too much into the woke Hollywood BS that we have been witnessing over the last few years. Now I don't want to get directly into why this character / actress was terrible in this show until we hit our character section, but the fans had an issue with this character and actress. The way the franchise responded on social media, and the way the cast responded shows how out of touch this franchise actually is with its fans and their concerns for the franchise. This character is Reva and the actress is Moses Ingram. This character and the response from not only the fans, but the overlords at Lucasfilm / Disney was one of the main controversies that came from this show. The biggest problem with this character was straight up the fact that the writing was horrible. It's that simple. The fans disliked the writing, and the way Moses acted her out. But of course, Lucasfilm responded to the controversy by immediately attacking the fans, as if their remarks against the character and actress were made because of racism and misogyny, when the majority of fans absolutely disliked the character, because she was poorly written and Moses didn't do the best job at acting. And no, this isn't me saying that there were no critics that were obviously only doing this because of the character being a woman, or because she was black. But the large majority of the people against the character only criticized the writing and acting, which is also where my criticisms of the character would come from. My biggest issue is that this show and the way Lucasfilm decided to lean way too much into the woke ideology is because at the end of the day, I want my media to be as apolitical as possible, as I'm trying to escape the realities of our world, and so are many other people who consume media. So when the studio decided it was smart to villainize the fans criticizing this aspect of the show, as if they were straight up racists and misogynists, it just backfired so bad on them. And that's why woke went wrong this time around. But of course that isn't the only thing that went wrong with the show. One of the other biggest issues with the show is simply the writing. Some of the writing for the show stooped to the level of the prequel sadly, and it really sucked to see how Obi-Wan continues to not really get the full justice he deserves as a character. There are also a lot of plot hole issues with the show. The biggest one being the obvious link between the Organas, Rebellion, and Obi-Wan. The Inquisitors, Vader, and Empire would never allow the Organas to feel safe, or even be welcomed in the Senate, even if it is technically useless in the grand scheme of things. There are plot hole issues with Obi-Wan and Leia actively knowing one another also. Kenobi literally saved her life, and she truly cared about him. There is no way she would forget who he was and barely care about his death in A New Hope. As for Luke, there's also a plot hole with that as well. Why does Luke not remember anything that happened when Reva found out about him being on the large homestead? These are all questions that may never get answered, because there's zero way to even explain those plot hole issues. Another big problem is the acting overall wasn't that great outside of Ewan McGregor and Vivian Lyra Blair, who plays young Princess Leia. They were the only two who were really believable in their roles. Everybody else was pretty horrible at acting. And well, their characters weren't written well either. But I will only be attacking the acting, as I want to save the actual criticism of the writings of the character for that section of the video. Moses Ingram is probably the worst performance in this show. She is trying way too hard to be an evil character, and is just overall not doing a great job with the material like Ewan McGregor was capable of doing. Her character is the main antagonist in this show, and she doesn't do a great job at performing as an evil, imposing, threatening character, when an Inquisitor is meant to hold all of those characteristics. I don't think Moses is a horrible actress, and she has a lot of time to get better at acting, but she was 100% not the right choice to play this character at this time. And I'm ultimately going to say the same for every actor who portrayed an Inquisitor in the show. They seem to be trying too hard at acting evil, and it just makes most of the scenes with them in it laughable and cringeworthy. Hayden Christensen as Anakin was actually not terrible, and most of the better scenes in the show, including the flashback sequences of Obi-Wan and Anakin training, and the final battle between the two, was actually pretty good. Another big problem I have with the writing is that it seemed a bit lazy. I say this mainly because, well, the show is pretty much The Mandalorian all over again, with Obi-Wan protecting Princess Leia. I think the trope of an older person protecting a younger character in these shows is getting a bit out of hand. Hopefully this is the last time we have to see this plot being used in Star Wars, because it honestly is getting old, and sadly Season 3 of The Mandalorian is probably going to be very similar to this format. So when it comes down to it, there are a lot of issues with this show. Many of them being continuity issues, and issues with the acting and writing of some of the characters and episodes. But how much does that actually hold the show back? And how much do the characters hold the show back? Number 2. The characters suck. The biggest criticism I have seen online has been about some of the characters, and the poor choices that the writers made regarding these characters. Ultimately, I feel the same way. I think that the characters are both a weakness and a strength of the show, but ultimately, some of these characters held the show back. The biggest elephants in the room are probably Reva, Obi-Wan, Vader, and Princess Leia. But I want to talk about some of the other minor characters and recurring characters in the show before I really dig into our main players. The first character I want to talk about is the Grand Inquisitor. I think the Grand Inquisitor in the show is probably the best written Inquisitor in the show, but I still really dislike this character in the way he was not only portrayed but written. Overall, I think they dumbed down the character so much, and he looks like an idiot with the decisions he makes regarding Reva and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It also doesn't help that for some reason, he looks like a human instead of the actual alien species he's a part of. The other Inquisitors, like the 5th brother and 4th sister, are also really terribly written. They are laughably bad characters, and it doesn't help that the acting for these characters were also horrible. Why were our main antagonists so horribly written? I don't understand it whatsoever. It's just like the Book of Boba Fett. Now let's talk about Owen Lars really quickly. I think that he was actually pretty good, and fits in pretty well with the original trilogy Uncle Owen character. My biggest issue with Owen, however, is that he's really anti-Obi-Wan when he knows that Obi-Wan is there to protect Luke. I can understand when Luke is older that he would be very anti-Obi-Wan and be very anti-Jedi. But with Luke at a young age here, I don't really understand it, to be honest. But the writing wasn't terrible in this case. Tala, who pretty much leads the current version of the rebellion, the Path, was an alright character. I thought that Indira Varma did a great job acting, but I think her character had a few issues. Many of these issues stem from the writing of her fighting sequences, which were kinda stupid. Maybe you could blame this more on choreography, but this woman should not be able to just completely hit stormtroopers with blunt objects and easily take them out.
Tala! Tala, we're in the open!
Where are you?
She's a strong character and a great role model for the young Princess Leia, so I will give the character that. I don't think she was a horrible character, but she wasn't the greatest character in the world, and that's really the best way I could put it. Now, let's get into one of the big characters of the show, starting with the young Princess Leia. I thought that Princess Leia for the most part was written well, with maybe some minor issues with her being a strong young lady one moment who easily reads other characters to getting easily kidnapped by fleeing his small gang. Overall, however, I think they wrote her as a perfect young version of Leia. A perfect young princess who may be quite bratty at times. I also think that Vivian Lyra Blair did a great job for being a child actor. I just think the biggest issues with Princess Leia being in the show have to do with the plot holes it creates later on in the franchise's timeline. I also think that they focus way too much on Leia, and I would have preferred they focus on a younger Luke instead after episode 4. Luke sadly plays a small role in the show until the final episode, which is pretty much centered on the protection of Luke. The next character I want to talk about is Darth Vader, quite possibly the greatest movie villain of all time. Do I think Vader was ruined by the show? Well, not completely. I also don't think he was all that great in the show either, if I'm being honest. They make him look a bit weak and dumb at times, and he is even taught a lesson by Revo when it comes to putting trackers on ships, a technique he uses later in A New Hope, and it seems that Leia kind of refers to the incident in the show when she talks about how easily the Empire allowed them to escape the Death Star in A New Hope. My biggest issues with Vader don't really stem from the way his character was written or portrayed. The biggest problem stemmed from continuity issues with his suit and the issue of using the re-speecher technology for his voice. For me, this is a massive moral issue that I kinda have. I'm not a huge fan of this technology, which is allowing Lucasfilm to easily replicate James Earl Jones' voice. It scares me because they are more than likely going to use this tech once he dies to get Darth Vader performances. Overall, however, the character of Darth Vader in the show isn't horrible. He just isn't that great either. He makes really bad decisions, which confuses me. His character is also another source of plot hole issues. He knows that Kenobi is alive, he knows the Organas still have contact with him. Yet, he doesn't do a thing about it for 10 years? It doesn't make any sense how they could just create massive plot hole issues regarding the characters and the information that we find out in this show. The addition of the Emperor talking to him about Obi-Wan shouldn't have completely deterred him from trying to spread the information of Kenobi and the Organa's connection. It honestly makes no sense, and I feel it kinda ruins a part of who Vader is. My favorite Vader moment in the show is when he proclaims that he killed Anakin Skywalker, and was only Darth Vader now. The main reason I actually liked him saying this was because it is a callback to what Obi-Wan tells Luke in A New Hope. It also kind of refers to one of my favorite lines from the original trilogy from Return of the Jedi, when Obi-Wan tells Luke that what he said to him was true from a certain point of view. So when it comes to Vader in the show, I'm really conflicted. There's a side of me that loves that he's in the show, but at the same time, I am worried by his appearance in this show, and the possibility of a live-action show where he is hunting Jedi down. The main reason being that I have moral issues, with not only the re-speecher technology, but because there were many moments in the show where he really did not feel like Darth Vader, even if he's only 9 years into being him. But again, like I said, I'm very conflicted about this version of Darth Vader. As for Reva, well, what can I really say? The writers did a pretty bad job at making her the main antagonist of the show. She doesn't come off as a threatening evil character. She comes off as a raging brat and nothing more. It also doesn't help that she seems to be overly strong. We see this when she easily defeats the Grand Inquisitor, and later when she does crazy shit with the Force in I believe episode 4. I also don't really like the fact that she figures out everything the Empire doesn't know so fucking easily and quickly. One of these things being that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader are the same person. The issue with this is that there were virtually no people who knew the identity of Darth Vader in the original canon, outside of Palpatine, Tarkin, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Ahsoka, and Luke Skywalker. And eventually Leia finds out because of Luke. Her finding out about that so easily is actually ridiculous and makes zero fucking sense in the context of the rest of the show. It ultimately created another plot hole that we will never see fixed. Her also finding out about the twins is another major issue for me. Nobody outside of Obi-Wan, Yoda, the Lars, and Organas knew about that. Her finding out about it so easily and because of a reckless move by Obi-Wan just makes me shake my head. In the end, I was just annoyed by her and the character they decided to make. She wasn't a good villain, and it didn't help that Moses Ingram did a pretty bad job with the material. It overall created an unlikable character, and not in the way you were supposed to not like the villains in the story. It just felt annoying every time she was on screen and interacting with all the other characters. There are other problems with her, even surviving Order 66. It's pretty much all of the younglings slash Padawans died that came into actual contact with Anakin. He also knew who she was the entire time, so that just makes me question Vader even more as a character. The issues with Reva are that I don't really have much positives to say about her. I just disliked this character so much, and really felt that she was a massive swing and miss by Lucasfilm. It sucks to say this, but she is probably the worst character in the show and nobody even competes. Now to the final and the most important character, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi is one of the 3rd or 4th most important characters in the history of Star Wars. He is also one of the most badass epic Jedi of all time, and I really think that we don't get to see enough of that in this show. He also makes bad decisions and goes back on his promise to protect Luke on Tatooine. This was always going to be my biggest problem with the show, because Obi-Wan failed at the job he is meant to be performing. Now we don't really know much what happens in the next 10 years, so I can't really comment on any of that. How did I really feel about the character of Obi-Wan in the show? I actually liked him, and I loved Ewan's performance. Obi-Wan makes mistakes in the show, yes, but I can understand why he does. When he finally awakens his inner Jedi, he returns to being the Obi-Wan of old, so it's very hard for me to complain about his character in the show. His second duel with Vader was very good, and in the end he becomes the Obi-Wan of old, and to me that is all that matters. He wasn't ruined, and that is the main thing I am grateful for. My biggest problem with the show completely lie with the plot holes, which sadly he's a victim of as well. Because he is on the side of all of the other issues / plot holes that stem from all the characters and them knowing about him. Overall, I think the good guys in this show were done right and the villains were a bit weak. But at the end of the day, the show was nowhere near as bad as the Book of Boba Fett, so what exactly does that mean when I say that? Number 3. Wait, did I actually like this show? It might come as a shocker, but I actually enjoyed Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sure, the show was heavily flawed, but at the end of the day I really did enjoy the show. Sure, its flaws were pretty blatant, but I decided to look past all of them because I thought that for the most part the show was worth it. It was worth seeing Obi-Wan Kenobi being played by Ewan McGregor, and it was worth seeing Hayden and Ewan battle it out as Obi-Wan and Vader. Now, it wasn't perfect, and it was nowhere near as good as the original trilogy or even The Mandalorian, but it was much better than the prequels, sequels, and the Book of Boba Fett. It wasn't boring, and the plot for the most part makes sense. It was a good show to shut your brain off for, and I can appreciate it for that reason. It also did Obi-Wan some justice, and allowed Ewan to truly show us his version could become the Alec Guinness Obi-Wan that we see in the original trilogy. Again, I have my criticisms of the show, but at the end of the day, I really did enjoy the show, and had a good time watching it. The high points of the show really outweighed the negatives for me, even with one of those being a weak villain in my eyes. The moments between Kenobi and Leia were great, the battles of Obi-Wan and Anakin / Vader were great, and seeing Obi-Wan rise above his weaknesses to become a strong Jedi again who is ready to do what he has to do to protect the twins was really interesting. In my opinion, we should get a season 2 that is based around Obi-Wan learning, training, and becoming wiser because this single season really felt super rushed in my opinion. But overall, like I said, I enjoyed the show a lot more than the Book of Boba Fett. But does that mean it's actually a great show? Probably not. The show still lacks in so many ways that still make it a disappointing show following the success of The Mandalorian, which continues to reign supreme over the current era of Star Wars. But it definitely isn't more disappointing than the Book of Boba Fett, or the entirety of the sequel / Disney era films. The main question is, where does it really rank in the franchise? Number 4. Conclusion. Obi-Wan Kenobi is a very strange show at the end of the day. I really like the show, but at the same time I really have a lot of issues with it. Sure, it's definitely better than the sequels in the Book of Boba Fett. Is it better than Solo: A Star Wars Story or even Rogue One? That's where it starts to get kinda difficult for me to actually really say how I feel about this show, or even rank it. In my honest opinion, the show is much better than the prequels, but how much better? When I think of Rogue One, I think of the fact that Darth Vader is a badass in that movie and very accurate to A New Hope. When I think of Solo, I think of a movie I thoroughly enjoyed even though it was also flawed heavily in the same way Obi-Wan Kenobi was. So how do I really rank this show compared to the rest of the franchise? I think it's fair to say that the show ranks right between Rogue One and Solo: A Star Wars Story. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't ranked super high, but you probably don't even know how I even rank the franchise's movies and shows. Being that this might just be my final video about a Star Wars product, I might as well rank them the best I can real quick. Empire Strikes Back, A New Hope, and Return of the Jedi in order are easily the top 3 products from the franchise. Following that, we have The Mandalorian. And after that, everything kinda nosedives, starting with Rogue One, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Solo: A Star Wars Story. Then to finish it all off, it goes as Revenge of the Sith, The Force Awakens, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, The Book of Boba Fett, The Last Jedi, and lastly, The Rise of Skywalker. So now you know how I feel about Star Wars in its current state. This might just be the last time I actually bring up Star Wars, just because I don't want to be known as that guy who completely ripped off the Plinker reviews of the prequels and made that his whole shtick. I don't want to be known as just a Star Wars guy. Sure, this franchise has inspired me to pursue a career in filmmaking, but at the end of the day, it really isn't everything to me, and I don't want it to be all I think about. Also, the controversy that could possibly come out of just this review alone makes me nervous to even continue making videos about Star Wars. So for now, this is probably going to be it in my Star Wars video series. A lot of the upcoming shows and films don't really pique my interest outside of The Mandalorian Season 3, so it kinda sucks to say, but Star Wars is probably officially dead to me outside of The Mandalorian, and honestly, I'm okay with that. Because sometimes you have to move on in life. My new inspiration and motivation to be a filmmaker and create content is this channel right here. Without it, I would be lost right now. It's pushed me to not only be a better content creator, but a better person. So yeah, it sucks that I'm probably saying goodbye to my biggest inspiration in life, but I have all the inspiration I need right here. With making this video, and creating content with my best friends. Obi-Wan Kenobi might not have been great or anything, but I still enjoyed it. But what I really enjoyed most that came from it, is this video right here.
This message is a warning and a reminder for any surviving Jedi. Trust in the Force.
Ben? You want to meet him?
We will each be challenged. Our trust, our faith, our friendships. But we must persevere. And in time, a new hope will emerge.
Hello there.
Wait, that doesn't make sense, you fucking idiot. Email me if you want a pizza roll. Leave a comment on this web zone and I will email you a pizza roll. Please visit our video web zone for other stuff like this and for some pizza rolls.
You know what to do.
Everywhere I go, I see his face.